Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Rise and Recreate podcast. This is a space for people who are learning that alignment isn't about forcing life to work harder. It's about understanding who you are and moving with your own nature instead of against it. I'm your host, Raechel Shanney, and today's guest is Molly Elizabeth, founder of Radiant Guidance and creator of the Life Map Method. Molly is a professional astrologer with over a decade of experience helping people navigate life transitions, relationships, career changes, and timing and purpose through the lens of empowered astrology. Her own journey has been one of repeatedly rebuilding her life around what felt true rather than what simply looked successful on paper, leaving behind paths that no longer aligned and creating work rooted in clarity, embodiment, and trust. Molly, I am so happy to have you here with us today. And I would love to start here. Was there a moment where you realized that you could no longer keep living a life that looked successful on paper and you actually started living according to what felt true to you?
Absolutely. So thanks for having me. I love this topic and this theme. A lot of my work is actually informed by this very thing, helping people connect to their dharma, which is right responsibility. And so for me, that happens when I was working at a prestigious university. I had graduated college with a psychology degree, philosophy double major, and I thought I would be pursuing, graduate studies in the psychology field. But so when I was working at this research lab, it was an addiction research lab, I got very disillusioned with just the way a lot of modern research is conducted, which has a lot to do with who's funding the study. And so the goal was to really help addicts and do brain neuroimaging scans and see what kinds of treatments would help addicts. And I worked primarily on, cocaine, nicotine, alcohol, and opiate studies. And one of the studies was being done by a grad student, and it was on mindfulness-based practices for addiction. And most of the other studies were actually just researching what drugs that could show benefit, right? Which is kind of ironic because you're trying to get people off drugs. So sadly, our one of our studies that I was working on, that mindfulness one, which I was most excited about, they no longer were funding it, even though that had very promising results. And I thought, wow, they're going to fund studies that are basically showing back pain medication can help addicts, but something like a tool like meditation, mindfulness, they don't want to they don't want to fund that, right? Because there's no money in it. And so I got very disillusioned. I was like, this is not really the path for me. I really want to help people get to the root of their mind, body, spirit imbalances. And I was already very deep into my interest in astrology because to me, it was like the most ancient form of psychology. I picked up philosophy in school because that seemed to me to be a precursor to psychology. And then astrology, I was like, wow, this is really like our original system. And it addresses mind, body, spirit levels of healing within a birth chart, which a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people just focus on the personality typing of it, right? So yeah, I met some people. I was lucky to meet people that had good resources on astrology. I met mentors, people that were professional astrologers, and I just thought, no, I want to pursue this path. Like, I want to be a professional astrologer, and it's kind of a weird thing to choose or pick because most of modern world doesn't even recognize it as a legitimate thing. They think it's just a belief system or a pseudoscience. But I don't know. I had such a conviction that I'm not gonna I'm not gonna pursue this anymore. So I left that role. I ended up moving across the country not that long after, and I lived on the West Coast where more of the holistic alternative healing modalities and systems are a little more common, you could say.
Mhm.
And I was lucky to connect with different astrology conferences, professional groups, and networking, and meet professional astrologers and, pursue some education in it. And yeah, that really just propelled me into my passion and what I do today.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I have a lot of questions actually that came up from that, but we'll start here. What were the feelings inside of your body when you were leaving this, like, very straightforward career path of psychology? You had just spent all of this time in school, which I'm sure was a lot of time, and then you're like, "I'm just jumping head first into the unknown with astrology," which I have, like, a little bit of knowledge of, but not that much, and just the belief that came with it that this would unfold for you.
It was challenging, I would say, because, I come from a more maybe mainstream family. And yeah, there was definitely a feeling of like kind of keeping it a little hidden, right? I say that there's a moment where I kind of came out of the broom closet, right? Because it's seen as this kind of occult witchy thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, there was a moment where I think just at first it was kind of something I just kept to myself more, the study of it, and I would surround myself with like-minded people, but I didn't really announce it, publicly or anything like that. And then over the years, meeting people that were professional astrologers and finding different traditions like Vedic astrology, which I practice now, and recognizing in different places these traditions are taken seriously. It just gave me more context and more comfortability to kind of come out with it and be like, "Yes, I'm an like, to really own that. And it is a vast subject. It's something you're never gonna really master. So a lot of people might look at you like, "Oh, really? Like, what qualifies you, to be an astrologer?" But there are, places like Organization of Professional Astrologers that are creating more, like, peer-reviewed processes for astrologers, and so I think in the next, like, decade, it's gonna be way more legitimized just with the advent of all the information age that we're in and all the people that are interested in this topic now.
Absolutely. And so through this exploration of astrology, when it found you, it sounds like, what did you start learning about yourself through it?
Yeah, so I was in the middle of my own kind of healing issues with chronic acne after being on birth control pill, antibiotics for most of all of my teens and 20s, right? And so around that time that I was really going deep into it and leaving that job, which was most of my 20s up through like my Saturn return, I had really horrible cystic acne and I was studying herbalism at the same time. And I remember finding these ancient texts by this guy called Nicholas Culpeper, and he was a Renaissance kind of herbalist and astrologer. A lot of the doctors back in the day were also astrologers, which is interesting. And just learning of like, oh, okay, what planets represent the skin? Every planet represents a different organ system. Every herb, every plant, right, our original medicine is connected to different planetary correspondences. And also just knowing transits, like these cycles of life that we traverse at different parts of our life, helps me really understand that I was going through, a kind of challenging initiation, kind of challenging period. So it helps me really understand more about like the imbalances in my system and also just that I was traversing like a more difficult time period. So it kind of gave me this higher perspective of like, okay, this is just, a temporary cycle and phase and it might be, years long, but there's an end to it and everything kind of ebbs and flows. So it gave me that broader perspective, I think.
Mm, I love that. Before dive deeper into like more astrological questions, I would love for you, for the listeners, for the people who, have only looked at maybe like their sun sign and they're just a little familiar with astrology, like you said, the personality traits, and they kind of just like have sloughed it off, which honestly, the majority of the listeners here, I think, probably have a deeper understanding than that. But if you could just give like an overview of maybe how it came to be and how it's been utilized in the past to give people just a baseline understanding.
Sure. Wow, that's hard to do in a short amount of time. But um, originally astrology was used to time things, right? It was kind of like our original calendar clock. And Western astrology is an earth based perspective of that, using the tropical zodiac. And Eastern sidereal Vedic astrology uses the sidereal zodiac, right? And that's star based. So there's two kind of distinctive zodiacs that one can use that are attributed to different systems. And there's many branches and systems of astrology across many cultures. And so it's this universal way of timing things. So originally, before we got into horoscopic astrology, which is looking at a person's chart, it was really used for elections, which is like selecting the ideal time, day, week, hour to conduct certain activities. And so rulers would come into power and be kind of coronated, you could say, at various particular days. It was that were seen as auspicious or lucky. And certain days were more kind of a period that maybe you hang back and don't do as much. So yeah, it's a way to basically help us. It's like a system originally to help us understand timing. And then it branched into more of a personal thing through horoscopic astrology. So ancient Hellenistic, which comes from Greece, and then ancient Vedic, which comes from India, actually had a lot of cross sharing of astrology ideas. The Library of Alexandria, which was in I guess kind of modern day Turkey-ish area. Um, that was a basic like hub of sharing this knowledge. And I learned this, later in my career that a lot of the Greek Western astrology also influenced ancient Vedic astrology. So there was this like cross pollination of ideas. And there's a lot more commonality between the systems than a lot of people realize. But yeah, essentially it started as a way to understand timing, before we got really into the clocks. And
Yeah.
it's amazing because, yeah, you can really pick and select better times for better activities. And when you apply that to a person, you can understand, okay, this season of life might be asking me to focus on this area of my life. And even though I really want a relationship, I really want love, maybe that period is really asking you to step more into your mission, your dharma. It's not necessarily the time for partnership union. And just as flowers and plants have their season that they bloom and come into their fruition, we too have that. And I think that helps us really honor our uniqueness and our authenticity because we no longer are just hustling to get things done at a certain milestone. Okay, well, I'm this age, I should have this by now. It really doesn't work like that. The more charts I look at, the more people I work with, we're all blooming in our own period, right? We all have our own time to shine and focus on our work and then maybe incubate and cultivate our inner world, right? And so it really helps people understand their own unique season of life that they're in, which can provide not only a lot of relief, but then give people ideas on how to best utilize that period, depending on what their goals are. And so it's kind of like everything in its right place and time. And I find that it's had very amazing results with different clients.
I love that. So it really just taps into our cyclical nature. And I think it's such an important message to put out there that everybody's timing is different because the world tried really freaking hard to fit us all into boxes and say, you should be married with 2 children by this age and own a house and have approximately one pet, maybe a dog or a cat. And you should do this, this, this. And it really tried to just like make us all generic beings that were following the same path when we know that that is absolutely not the truth and everybody does have very unique timing. And so I would love for you to kind of go into what you've seen, through your clients when you've read their charts and they've had these aha moments of, okay, like you're right. Maybe it's not time for a partnership right now. Maybe I should focus on building something. What do I want to create? Like, I'd love for you to kind of dive a bit more into what you've seen.
Absolutely. So what you just mentioned, it's worth kind of adding on to that first. Uh, yeah, we all have our own unique timing, right? It's not going to be this like universal thing, but society has kind of set it up to hit certain things at certain times because that's easier for structuring a society and how schools kind of operate. Okay, you go to school from this age to this age, and it kind of helps put you on a track. People are easier to kind of manage that way. But, that's just not life. I think everyone, you hit a certain age and you have that realization. I don't know if you're a millennial, but especially millennials are a generation very much defying. what's normal.
Yeah.
Maybe yeah, I would just say that, yeah, that generation is, like, definitely coloring outside the lines. But, things like I always tell people I don't have to actually convince people or convert them to believe in astrology because by the time people meet me or reach out to me for a session or it's just like a serendipitous thing, they already feel something shifting. Like they already know something is changing in their life. Like I don't have to convince them of that. And what's so wild is I've gotten to the point with my study and understanding. It's basically like learning a language, right? I'm fluent in the language now that I can meet someone and they can share with me what they're going through, like what kind of crossroads they're at, and I can kind of even tell, okay, they're probably leaving this dasha and going into this one. So I'll give an example. Dashas are basically chapters, right? That you're kind of under the ruler of a particular planetary energy. And it's like if our life is a book and it's divided into chapters, there are these grand timing kind of scales that we use to help identify, okay, this is like a decade long period this person's in. And then there's sub dashas, right? So it's kind of like this fractal system. So I say it's like having a director that's kind of the core influence in your life in that allotted time. And this one client came to me and he was had already reached his material success in life in his 40s and was a very lucky person, I would say, and probably worked very hard as well. But he had already kind of sold a fintech company, had reached this like pinnacle of material success. But he said, I'm having a spiritual awakening right now. And so it was really interesting because I was like, huh, well, he's, like, gotten all this, like, tech money. He sold this company. He said he lived very degenerate kinda lifestyle. I was like, "Oh, sounds like he left his Rahu Mahadasha." Rahu's all about Maya, the illusion. It can bring a lot of gains in that period, but it can also be a time period where you're very, like, ruthless towards your goals and achievement. And I was like, "It sounds like he left his Rahu and now he's in Jupiter because Jupiter's all about like, okay, what's my higher belief system? Like I want to connect to truth. I want to connect to like, a higher purpose." And so sure enough, when I scheduled his reading and we met up, I was like, yep, he had just shifted dashas within the last like 2 years into the Jupiter period. And sometimes it's like being on a bike and you switch gears and it's kind of clunky when you're in that new dasha. You're like, okay, my priorities are different, my goals are different, the things that motivate me are different, but I don't know what it is. But I know I need some guidance, right? That's usually when people are seeking an astrologer, some major timing period just ended and a new one begun. So yeah, that was a great example. And he was just wanting to do things that were more aligned to things that he finds meaningful. And it's not that his other work wasn't meaningful. For those years he built that company and had that success, it was very appropriate for him and meaningful to, do the tech thing and which is technology is actually ruled by Rahu, which is the north node of the moon. So yeah, he was very compelled to like chase all that stuff in that period and that did satisfy him for that period. And then it's kind of like, okay, now what? And so that's what I always tell people. You know, there is no real stability or security in life, in my opinion. It's always just new cycles and new phases. And some chapters are pretty long chapters. And that role that you had, that job that you had, fit that chapter. And then you come to another phase, and what we call burnout or midlife crisis is literally you're entering this other kind of cycle. And there's new kind of energies that you're drawn to and new things that you're prioritizing. And so astrology is a beautiful tool that really helps people in those transitions because in this modern world we're kind of expected to just like pick something and stick with it. Just go and that's your thing. And really the more people I meet, it's just not how things go.
No, not anymore. I mean, I've probably had like like almost 30 jobs and I'm 37.
Wow.
Like I traveled a lot. I changed. There was one time where I was moving for like 8 years. I would live somewhere for no longer than 6 months and then bounce to the next thing. And so that was looked down upon for a while. People were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get a job when you have that many jobs on your resume." And I was like, "Whatever. I have so many skills now. I just pick and choose what I put on my resume." Like, there really are so many other options than what we are told there are. And so speaking of other options and ending up, creating something for yourself, what did that process look like when you were actually building the business? Because I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast are, more of the entrepreneurial spirit, and always curious to hear somebody's stories of like, what did that process actually look like? How long did it take? Like, what happened when you lost a little bit of like motivation and you're like, what the hell am I doing? Should I keep going? And like holding on to that belief of this will work.
That's a great question. I would say I'm still in the process, right? I don't think when you're an entrepreneur, it ever really ends. I don't know if you've ever just like arrived because you're constantly, working for yourself and you're always on, right? When you work for yourself, freelance, etc. So, what did that process look like? I mean, yeah, there's definitely phases where I did wonder, like, should I just get a stable job? Should I just get a
Mhm.
secure job? But I guess I just have always had a lot of trust in the process. And I always, because I study astrology and I've looked at my own chart and I've had my own readings with astrologers, I did just feel this conviction in my soul that this is the work I'm meant to do. And that really keeps me going. Even if it's like, oh, there's a slower period of time, or because I feel like when you are aligned to what your kind of higher kind of convictions are, the universe always finds a way to like put the right people in the right place in front of you. And I will say, I don't know if you know human design, but I'm a projector in human design. If you know the aura types, are you familiar with that?
That's so funny because literally, I'm not even kidding you. In my head, I was like, I'm going to ask her next about human design and the correlations between that and astrology. And no, segue, here we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Well, it incorporates astrology. It's based on your birth time and all that, but it's a separate system. But I do incorporate the aura types. But being a projector, I was just going to share, it's the way that a projector markets themselves. Like a lot of the modern marketing advice for people, projectors, it doesn't really work for this particular non-energy aura type because most of my clients come from either like word of mouth, like a referral from a client I've already had, or they meet me in person and they pick up my aura energy. Okay, this person has something to share, but it's never been through just like cold marketing, having a funnel, any of the common things that people say you need to be successful or, to survive. It's funny to me because, yeah, and so there's definitely doubts because I'm like, all these systems that like I've tried don't really work for me. And then I just started to trust that, the right people come when they're meant to. And I'm not really meant, the non-energy types aren't really meant to just hustle all the time. We non-energy types actually show other people that there's other ways to kind of exist and navigate the world and work and life. And I think we're at this collective point where people are really burnt out, collectively of just trying to do sales and trying to do marketing and being overstimulated all the time. And projectors are really, and manifestors and reflectors, all the non-energy aura types are really here demonstrating there's other ways to be. You can just be and things get provided instead of having to always like hunt for things. I think it's a more kind of receptive, things come to us at the right time, the right clients. So it's always worked that way, and the more I've observed that, the more encouragement and confidence it gave me because I just have that trust, I guess, of, like, understanding how my energy works, understanding my unique path, and when you have that, it gives you that kinda just confidence and trust, and the right opportunities come to you, you attract them.
Mhm. I love that, and I think what you just said was a beautiful culmination of how human design and astrology benefit each other, where with human design, you learn how your energy works, how you're, like, operating in this human body. I know when I personally discovered human design, I'm a manifesting generator, so I usually have like a ridiculous amount of ideas and I'm usually doing multiple things at once. And, you're told like, oh, you can't really get that done with multitasking. And I was reading my design and I looked behind me on my coffee table and I had 3 books that I was reading at the same time, all laid out. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. And it just really like solidified, I think, my like how I show up in the world. And then with the astrology of like guiding you along your life's path and showing you these different chapters. And with that being said, what do you think most people misunderstand about astrology?
Mm. I think that it's this very, like, one-dimensional box that you're put in, and that it's just your sun sign. I mean, that's huge. But granted, that gets a lot of people piques their curiosity into astrology, so I'm not gonna hate on that. It's more just that, yeah, people assume, "Okay, you're gonna tell me I'm like this, and it's limiting me and putting me in a box." I always tell people astrology is like we're unpacking all the boxes. You're a
Mm,
unique human crystal, and astrology is literally your geometry, right? It's like the planets that were combined at your birth that create different yogas or gifts that you have and aptitudes. It's very in depth and layered, and it shows all of your facets. So I always tell people, it's like, no, we're unpacking all the boxes when we're looking at your chart and really getting into like your core unique essence. And more than ever now, because of AI, right? And because things are getting automated and made really general and people are worried about having job security, I think knowing your unique potency, right? Like a plant has a unique potency that's the medicine in it. They call it like prabhava in Ayurveda. So we each have that, a unique gift, a unique offering within us. And to me, the astrology like really gets into the specificity and the uniqueness of your conglomeration of who you are, your soul essence. It's like your perfume, right? And it's all these different components that make up your scent. And I think the more you connect to that, it's very empowering and it opens up possibility. So to me, it's like it's an archetypal language, and people will flatten that to like, oh, I'm this sign, so I'm like this, and that's it. When
yeah.
really it is so nuanced and it's very expansive, actually. So I would say that's the biggest misconception.
Yeah, I love that. And since you mentioned AI, it just reminded me of something that I heard this weekend that I loved that makes total sense to this conversation. So I was at a yoga festival, 3-day yoga festival this past weekend, and one of the leaders said, in the world of AI and all of this artificial intelligence, we need to tap back into the true AI, ancient intelligence. And I was like, he's right, and you can see such a movement for that too. It's like this very intense duality of having all of this artificial intelligence literally shoved down our throats. It doesn't matter what app, what website, whatever we open, it has already been embedded within that. And there's this deep sense of wanting to like return to a more simple way, a more simple life with more connection and community, the ancient intelligence, and I just thought that was so incredible, and here we are weaving astrology back in, a very ancient, methodology, and, with that being said, and you kind of choosing your own path of turning inward to figure out what it was that you wanted to do, was there something in your chart when you were able to, really read and understand your own chart that you were like really excited like to give somebody like encouragement of like, oh, let me dive deeper into my chart to see if I can find a moment like this for myself.
Absolutely. Every aspect of my chart helps me feel connected to just validate, let's say, validated or confirmed things I was already drawn to. And especially if you're walking an unconventional path, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are, there's a lot in the chart that can be like this relief of like, oh, and that's why it's great to. I go to astrologers myself because I can't see my own blind spots life clearly, right? I'm biased. So yeah, when I would go to astrologers, I would feel this sense of like really being seen, like on a soul level. Where a lot of us don't really get that from our families, right? They're kind of like what they want you to do. They'll project like what they think you should do, but only we really know, right? And so there were definitely things in my chart. Uh, I'll list some things that might be jargony, but hopefully not. But basically, like my chart ruler, um, that would be like the planet that rules your rising sign. It's Jupiter in traditional astrology, and that sits in the fifth house of counseling. That's a house that's considered a house of counseling. And knowing, learning I was a projector. deep, like many years, maybe 6 years into my astrology studies and practice, and I was a little resistant to human design. I was like, "I don't know, this guy channeled it." But then I learned I was a projector and we're here to master systems and guide people, and I was like, "Well, that's pretty damn literal to what I've already been doing." So these kind of confirmations. I have Lilith, this asteroid that's all about our like rebellion and raw truth, feminine, empowerment on my midheaven. And so I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And it shows having kind of like an unconventional public role. So there's a lot in my chart where I'm like, okay. And again, it kind of to me, it just like gets me more juiced up and energized because I'm like, okay, yeah, it gives me more validation that this is what I'm here to do. And it's cool, right, to have that confirmation. And that often happens with people in sessions. They're like, yeah, I was already kind of leaning into that. So, no astrologer is going to tell you what to do. I don't think any good ones will, right? But they can kind of just guide you or connect you back to your map when you feel lost, right? Because at the
Mm.
end of the day, you have all this insight within you. Like you're already walking it. It's like gravity, it's already happening. But sometimes we need a reminder.
I love that, connecting you back to your map because it's true. Like, even if there's something that we feel very strongly about and we're working towards, there are just shit just happens that knocks you off your path sometimes and really makes you question everything. And this is such a beautiful tool to tap back into, your mission, your what you're meant to do here, the things that you're meant to learn. And yeah, that was such a beautiful thing. Also, I didn't know asteroids were a part of your chart.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
That's more of a
that
Western thing, but yeah.
yeah, that's super cool. So, for somebody who is now very interested after hearing this conversation and they're like, "Oh, like, where do I start?" Because it sounds like for me at least, of course, I've started with the basics. I've had many astrology readings to the point where like I haven't really gone into my own chart because I don't understand it. But if there was like a little path for somebody to take to start learning more about themselves other than just, the three main signs, what advice would you give them?
That's a great question. Um, well, I started as a Western astrologer and now I do Vedic astrology. So I would encourage people to like look at their sidereal chart, which you can do I think one of the sites is called astro.com. I believe they have like a sidereal chart calculator and that'll show you, all your planetary placements according to star-based astrology. So I would say that's a way to start. But I know that's kind of similar to what you're saying, like, okay, locating those three placements. I would also just learn what dasha are you in, right? Like, what dasha are you currently running? Because that can just help you give you insight into what the time period's asking of you that you're currently in, the phase of life. Another thing is your Atma Karka. It's called the soul planet. It's the planet with the highest degree in your chart. And whether you're looking at your Western chart or your Vedic chart, find the planet that has the highest degree, like the closest to 29 degrees, right? Because there's 29 degrees per sign. And that's called your soul planet. And that kind of helps you understand, another piece of the purpose puzzle, right? So those would be things that I would suggest without being overly complex. Right, and now we do have amazing research tools, so you can kind of like I have a YouTube where I talk about a lot of just very beginner-friendly astrology topics. But, YouTube can be a good resource to just learn some of the more beginning pieces of it. And in terms of human design, I would say definitely look up your aura type and what that means, because we all have a unique way our energy works, and I feel like it's so important to know that because like where people want to give up or get burnt out comes from it's really I say it's like a placement issue. It's not an energy issue, it's not a motivation issue, it's placement issue. You're misaligned, right, to what is ideal for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the majority of people can relate to feeling that kind of dense energy of I'm not meant to be doing this right now. And the more you learn about yourself utilizing these tools, the easier it is for you to grasp onto that belief of, oh, I can shift my life. I can recreate my life. I can reinvent myself. And so with like planetary, like worldly astrology, would you mind just kind of giving us like an overview of what's happening with the planets like currently in this time?
Sure. Well, there's something called this is a very big time phase we're in called the Kali Yuga, right? In Vedic. And it's this idea that there's a lot of chaos, right, in the world in this kind of it's almost like an age, it's a planetary age that we're in. Like these come thousands of years, right? And so we're in this more stressful part of the cycle where there's a lot of false teachers, right? There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of confusion. There's this pull towards people wanting answers and guidance. But, the number one thing to practice right now is discernment, I think. And that's why any good teacher, any good healer will always bring you back to yourself. And so I would say that's like an important thing for people to take into account as we get bombarded with all this information and we might think something is, spiritual and it could just be wrong information or manipulation, right? I had my own fair share of weird encounters like that. Like I was recruited for a cult at one point. Well, it was a different story for a different time, but yeah, just knowing that, like, really, like to come back to our intuition, right, which is our own kind of inner GPS, right, of what truth is for us, because it's going to be different for every person. And then we're in this kind of very like Rahu dominant phase, and Rahu's the north node of the moon. We just had a Rahu Saturn conjunction 2 years ago now, and that is really this boom of technology going on, and this information and, um, overstimulation overstimulation that's happening, so it also calls for, though, coming back to those more, like, holistic and alternative healing methods, like you were saying, those ancient ways. That's gonna be like the pendulum swing, I think, where we're kind of integrating the technology with the ancient, which is cool. It's this kind of ancient future thing that's happening. But yeah, grounding, just grounding, connecting to the earth, discharging excess energy, working with frequency medicine like PEMF, sound healing, negative ions just from walking on the beach or being near a waterfall. All of that can help balance this kind of upcharge of Rahu, right? Which is considered the north node of the moon. It's also like the head of a dragon, and he's this hungry energy. So balancing that with some of the things I mentioned. And then we just had this beautiful today, Jupiter, the planet of expansion, just moved, according to Vedic astrology, into the sign of Cancer in its exaltation. And Jupiter can really connect you to kind of like higher learning, higher ideals. And so whenever a planet kind of goes into its own sign, where that is in your chart, that can show an area of life where you have maybe increased expansion and blessings. And so if you have Cancer dominant, like people listening in their Vedic chart, like a Cancer rising, Cancer moon. This can be a really beautiful, um, really next almost like a year, right? Because Jupiter will stay in a sign, move into a new sign like every 12 years, right? 12 signs in the zodiac. So yeah, it's almost like a year period, right? Where they can look forward to this kind of expansive energy. And Jupiter also rules travel, right? Far distant lands. So those are just some things that come off the top of my head without getting overly technical for people to kind of explore and think about.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. So, for everybody listening, I will put Molly's YouTube in the description below and all of her links where you can find, book a session, etc. And is there anything left on your heart that you would like to say to people listening, whether it's astrology related, recreating your life, whatever it is that you would like to end this with?
Yeah, I would just like to encourage someone if they are at the recreation phase or if they're feeling lost to know to just keep going, right? And to know that everything ebbs and flows. So as as heavy as intense as it can get, know that there's always going to be that like the pendulum always has to go the other way too. So to just like hang in there really, to have that encouragement and to not give up. Especially if something's put into your heart, I really truly believe it's there for a reason. So if you're feeling called to something, you don't know why, or you don't really have support, to really explore that, if it's something on your heart to follow it.
Absolutely. Tap into yourself. Don't give up. Believe, believe, believe. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for enlightening everyone on a bit of astrological knowledge. And like I said, all of the links will be listed below if anybody feels called to get a reading from Molly. That would be incredible. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Do you love talking about spirituality and how we can heal ourselves and speaking your hopes and your dreams out into the world and really reflecting on what it is that you want in life? What are your intentions? What are your hopes and dreams and goals? And pulling oracle cards and speaking sweet affirmations to your water and following the moon cycles and all of these fun conversations that we typically don't get to talk about with people in our real life. Well, this is exactly why I created the Rise and Recreate community. We are a group of women. We meet every Wednesday. We regulate our nervous system through guided breath work. Then we have 30 minutes to just do whatever brings us the most joy. Maybe it's meditating, sitting in silence. Maybe it's dancing, doing yoga, stretching, whatever it may be. Really tuning in to what it is that we want in life. And then we come together as a community to talk about it and share our hopes and our dreams with other like-minded women and get support when we need it and have people listen to what it is that we want to say and to speak out into the world. If you would love to come check out the community, the link is below. We would love to have you.